course, the demise of Wilko, the demise of the High Street. It's a familiar story, it's a depressing story, and I'd love to know why you think it might be. I think it goes back to exactly what we've been discussing this morning, and that is this lack of joined-up thinking. We've got business rates through the absolute roof. We have people who are afraid to drive anywhere near their high street because they think that the council is going to ticket their vehicle. We've got road closures right, left and centre throughout various cities. And also I think that I'm going to throw in another aspect of this as well. I think that it's actually feeding into itself, with high streets seeing fewer stores remaining open and becoming quite grim places. You know, betting shops and coffee shops and hairdressers are about the only three that you ever see on the high street anymore, which means that you don't really have a reason to visit. And also I wonder whether crime is a factor as well now. The boss of Oxford Street, now I'm just going to look this story up, has said that one of the reasons that he believes Oxford Street, the Marks and Spencer, not NHS, M&S, except they're very much the same for me. I feel health when I go to M&S, has warned the demise of Oxford Street, which is, of course, arguably London's most famous shopping street. It's fueling crime, including the US-style flash mob looting that we were talking about in the last hour. He says that something must be done to save the jewel in London's shopping crown. This is after this TikTok-inspired looting that we saw. And again, this point that it's all sort of feeding into each other, that when a high street is seen as a bit of a dump, then it becomes somewhere where crime occurs, which means fewer people want to go to the high street.
But it kind of goes full circle back to what you talked about. It's a breakdown of culture as well, isn't it? All of it, because the high street was very much a part of British culture. And the demise of that has come hand in hand with other things in culture that we're seeing. When Marks and Spencer's left East Ham High Street, that's where I grew up, I knew that the High Street was finished. And it is. It's now a really depressing place full of betting shops, pound shops and cigarette and retailers.
But it's also councils. Well, actually, let's bring in someone who's, I'm sure, got a lot to say about this, who might agree or disagree with some of our analysis. Andrew Goodacre is the CEO of the British Independent Retailers Association, who is joining us now. Morning to you, Andrew.
Yeah, good morning.
So, I mean, you might have just heard our analysis there. It seems that there is an awful lot that is feeding into this, a lack of joined-up thinking. When you lose a couple of shops, then the high street itself starts to deteriorate, which means it becomes more susceptible to crime. Perhaps too higher council rates, business rates, council tax, energy bills. You've got people who don't want to drive to their high street because they're scared to death of getting a parking ticket. It's all of these different, a cultural thing that perhaps we've lost part of what was about Britain, a nation of shopkeepers, but we don't want that anymore. And also, overall, the overarching side of this is just this lack of joined-up thinking. All of these things in isolation, probably not enough, but when you join them all together, not enough has been done to stop it.
Yeah, you know, you've just hit on many of the key points that we often raise with local and national government, that we need to see cohesive thinking and a cohesive approach to addressing some of the challenges we have on high streets. We know consumer behaviours have changed over the years. Online shopping has progressed and developed. But there's other things that support high streets. Hybrid working is very much encouraging people to shop more locally. So we're seeing differences of behaviours in the large town centres, the large places like Oxford Street, but equally we're seeing challenges in some of those and opportunities in some of those suburban areas and more local high streets that have developed well. What makes a good high street, whether it's large or small, is diversity. You need to create diverse usage on there. That's partly leisure, it's culture, it's residential, it's retail and it's hospitality. Those 5 areas working together in the right balance will create a vibrant, busy high street that people want to visit. And I fear that sometimes the local authorities and national government and people I've sometimes spoken to almost view that retail is terminally decline because of people will just buy online. Well, 70% of people are still buying shops, and that number is actually been increasing since the end of COVID. So there is a desire. People want to buy in the shops. Shops play a role. the retailers have to be better and smarter and more attractive. But let's not write off the high streets. They can work, but they need careful curation in delivering a place that people want to visit.
But we've been talking about this for, I mean, it's almost decades now. I remember Mary Portas was, talking about this years ago. There have been TV programmes about it. Do you think that the government wants to keep vibrant high streets?
Yeah, I do. I'm part of something called the Retail Sector Council, which is sponsored by the Department of Business and Trade. And that talks about the role that retail specifically plays, but they also have a similar council for hospitality. And the bulk of our retail and hospitality sales are still through physical premises on high streets. Now, what is true is that the business model that these retailers used to use and still use, that's the business model that's really under threat. You mentioned business rates. Business rates have been a burden now for many, many years, and too much of a burden for many shops, which is why Wilko has struggled and other large chains are closing stores where they think it's appropriate to do so. And rents always go up, and landlords play a role here in being more.
And what I'm trying to sort of drill down is if governments know that this has been happening for years and years and years, and nothing is being done about it. Governments also have known, I mean, this isn't a new thing that the internet is something that people like to shop on and that Amazon does very well. This isn't news to anyone, but there just doesn't seem to be the political will to come up with a cohesive solution that would solve all of this. We shouldn't be still having these conversations.
Yeah, I know, it is frustrating. It's a financial question, effectively, because the value of business rates per se to the Treasury is something like 26, 27 billion pound. The retail share of that is 7 or 8 billion pound. And that's hard for the government to write off effectively. So they need to find a different way, or as we have been pushing for many, many years now, is, well, tax the businesses where the business is going to, where the wealth has gone to. And this has very much been about online traders. This government has walked away from online sales tax or some way of making those large businesses like Amazon and ASOS and people like this who do so very well online, but pay so little tax by comparison. And there needs to be a better way of approaching that.
And it's absolutely that I mean, I agree that there should be if you are an online retailer that has a turnover at a certain amount. I don't believe that sort of the small shops that are online retailers should have to pay this. But if you are a large online retailer with a turnover at a certain amount, you should pay an online sales tax that is included. But because also there is the other knock-on effect is that what seems to happen is that it's the people at the bottom that want to use the high street that end up saddled with the debt, the small retailers, the people that want to go drive to the high street and end up getting a parking ticket. That's where the revenue seems to come from these short-term thinking councils and governments, rather than the revenue from, one of the issues with the congestion that they came to want to solve is delivery drivers working for a lot of these big retailers. Yes. A lot of the issues come from the online retailers themselves that aren't paying much tax. So it's such a no-brainer that those are two areas there where revenue could be gained.
I agree. They could look at the way deliveries are done and make that more of an income stream for them, and some kind of delivery tax maybe that could be seen as a green way as well of helping things out.
I don't pay for delivery on Amazon. I don't.
Well, and there's a challenge, isn't it? And there's something that could be changed, and that money could be compulsory and it could be delivered to government and then could be used more productively. But you mentioned accessibility, because I think this is an area that gets overlooked at the moment. And I'm so frustrated because you mentioned closed streets, lack of parking, expensive parking when it is there. I know of a place in the Cotswolds, a tourist spot, that after this year will ban coaches from visiting that place because they don't want tourists to visit it. And yet it's based on tourists, it's based on people, and I really fail to understand local council, local authority thinking when they just seem to plough a furrow of, we want to be greener, we want to be nicer. We want to keep people away from us almost, because we want to protect something that would just deteriorate without people and without that social fabric, which retail and high streets have supported for many years. And they seem bent on destroying some of it, and I just find that hard to comprehend. And there's no cohesiveness. You know, if you want to stop traffic moving into a town centre for safety reasons or to create pedestrianised areas, then invest in the structure that allows people to get there in a different way. But that all too often doesn't happen.
Yeah,
It's just kind of, we'll do this one thing, we'll see what happens, and then we'll do something else. And at the same time, in the middle of it, are hard-working people who have spent their lives creating a business that is not failing because they're no good at it, they're good retailers. It's failing because people are not giving them the chance to succeed.
Yeah, and we've seen it with retailers as well, suffering as a result of these low traffic neighbourhoods and all of those things. Listen, good to talk to you, Andrew Goodacre, CEO of the British Independent Retailers Association.